Something a little different for Joe Daddy's garage right here. A friend of mine needed some brakes done on his Ford F350, so I've already done the fronts, and I watched some videos on doing the rear, but I wanted to make my own. I did have some trouble getting the dual wheels off. They were seized up, so I had to spray some lubricant like WD-40 and then beat on it with a 5-pound dead blow to break the wheels loose. But his complaint is that the parking brakes don't work. So as I've looked at it, I've also found that it's hard to see, but the brake pads are pretty much gone. So first thing I'm going to do is remove the caliper, and by doing that I'll remove these 2 bolts on the back side here, one there and one down there. Take those out, remove the caliper, and then I'm going to remove the bracket or the carrier that holds the caliper, and then I'm going to step into removing the rotor. So here we go. Alright, the caliper's off, and just as a note, the bolts that held these on were 12mm, and once you remove the caliper, I don't like to let the caliper hang by the hose, so it's hanging up on the spring up there so that there's no weight on the hose putting a bind on it. And now we can look at these pads. Yep, almost gone. So we'll be putting on these nice new thick pads, which should help tremendously. So I'll finish taking that off and removing the bracket, and then I'll move on to the rotor. Alright, the carrier is off. It's down there, and the bolts that were in it were an 18mm. So now that that's out of the way, the next task is going to be pulling this rotor off. So I know I got to pull the axle out. So I'm going to break these loose. Those are 15mm. Get those out of the way, and then I know I'm going to need this socket right here. Now this is a kit from Advanced Auto Parts, and there's the part right there, spindle nut. So you can just rent this kit. Now, it costs $100 to rent, but if you're not going to be doing brakes every 6 months, probably your cheaper way out. Just rent it, take it back, and get your money back. So away we go. That was simple enough. Pulled out the 8 bolts, pulled the axle. It's sitting over here. Nothing to it. Slides right out. The next part will be putting on, getting this nut off of here. I'll slide in my spindle nut. Fits right in. Take that loose and get ready to pull the rotor off. Okay, I removed both parts of the retaining rings. You got the outer one here, and you can see these serrated edges. When that interacts with this piece on the inside, it locks it in. And the inner piece has a tang right there, and there's a groove cut in the housing up here that only sits one direction. That locks that in, and then this locks against it, and it keeps the assembly from coming loose. And then I will now, you can get the bearing out. As you slide the housing off, the rotor housing, the bearing will come out, so you want to make sure you catch that. Hard to do with one hand. But I'll take the bearing out, and then the whole thing will come off, and I can get a look at those parking brakes. Okay, so the rotor is removed with the internal drum for the parking brake, and you can see all the residual of the shoes left in there. The rotor itself looks pretty good, so I'm going to leave that alone. But parking brakes, you can see how worn down this is. There's hardly any shoe left. So we're going to replace that with some new shoes with a lot more material on it. And so to remove these, you got this upper spring that holds it together, and a lower spring, an adjuster, and then these tension clips. And there's a rod that goes all the way through to the backside that holds these in place. So when I compress this spring with a screwdriver, I can rotate the pin from the backside. There's a little slot right here, it's kind of hard to see, but that's slotted. And the end of this looks like a T, so I can rotate that and pull it out, and then I can start removing these shoes. I wanted to show you this there wasn't 2 springs, there were 3 springs. This spring was in the back. Sorry, this spring was in the back, hooked through these holes, and this one was in the front, also hooked to those holes in the same location. I couldn't see it before. So there's those 2, the adjuster, and then this spring was in the front. And you look at the shoes, match up the holes so everything lines up the same on both sides. Remove the old ones, set up the new ones. So now I have to reassemble everything and get it back up there, which was a little bit of a challenge to get out, but with little leverage you can move the world, and I'll get it back in. Got the shoes on. Now what I did, I still have to hook up one more spring, but what I did is I hooked the big spring, then I hooked this side, which is the back side, and I pried this side over until I got it back up in the slot. And might still have to adjust it just a little bit right here, but the only thing left is to put on this other spring. I got the lower in, I shortened the adjuster up, and then put this spring in. Just use a pair of needle nose pliers to pull it over, and also put these clips on. So almost done with that. About ready to put the rotor back on. Alright, the rotor's back on, the axle's back in, and the carrier is back in place. The only thing left to do is get the caliper back on. I wanted to show you a simple tool that I picked up a while ago. It says AC Delco on it, but probably anybody makes it. And you can see it's just a simple clamp that you use to compress the pistons in the caliper. Now in this case, what you do is set an old brake shoe or brake pad right here. Sorry, right here, and then put that plate part inside this opening, and then clamp in, tighten it up, and it'll compress those 2 pistons. Works good. I've been using this thing for years.